Welcome to the third day of 3-day HTML5 Programming Code Camp. The 5 topics that we are going to cover include web worker, server-side events, and drag and drop. And then we are going to go 3D graphics, and then we have 2 sessions on CSS3. And then the last topic is going to be WebRTC, real-time communication. Okay. So let's start with the presentation. So here we are going to cover these 3 separate topics. These are short topics, and now we just combine into a single session. So web workers and server-side events and drag and drop. Okay. So let's talk about web worker first. So what is and why web worker? So web worker lets you run the JavaScript code in the background. So without web worker, you might actually experience this long-running JavaScript task, block other JavaScript tasks, which cause a browser UI hang. So you might have seen this warning message once in a while. So if your JavaScript code somehow takes a long time to finish, your browser will actually detect that, will actually will actually pop up this dialog box asking you whether you want to continue or not. And so by having your JavaScript code to be performed, to be executed in the background, you are not going to actually see this kind of problem. Okay, so with web workers, background processing through web workers, and you're not going to actually experience this unresponsive script warning anymore. And the caller and web worker can, and in fact, the exchange messages. They can send and receive messages. So use cases of web worker. So background number crunching, background notification from server to a local database. So because of the single page architecture, needs to actually communicate with the server for fetching data or executing some business logic. Notification, the responses from the server might have to be waited by JavaScript code. In that case, you might want to use web worker for waiting those responses from the server. Background picture update from server or search query. So anything that might take some period of time could be executed in the background using web worker. Caveats of web worker API. So the things it cannot do is that it cannot access window object directly, and it cannot access the DOM APIs either. But what you can do is they can use a JavaScript timing API. So the way that you are going to use web worker is basically creating web worker object, passing JavaScript file to be executed. Okay, and on the caller side, you're basically setting up asynchronous event handler for receiving messages and errors from the worker, and the caller can use the post message to send a message to the worker. And the worker has exactly the same programming model. It can set up the on-message event listener, and then for receiving messages from the caller, and it can use the post message to send a message to the caller. So the programming model actually look pretty much the same with the other. Yesterday we learned cross-domain messaging, right? And programming model is exactly the same. Okay, so this is the code. So let's say we have main.js JavaScript code, and that's the caller. So if it needs to if it needs to perform some the JavaScript task, it could capture that task in a separate file called the task.js file. Okay, so it's going to create the web worker object passing that JavaScript file, and then it will set up the on-message listener. Okay, for receiving message, and for sending a message is going to use post message. Okay, same thing for the callee or task. in this .js file. So it can set up the on message event listener, and you can use a post message. So on message is for receiving message from the caller, and post message is to send a message to the caller. Okay, so very similar programming model with a cross-domain messaging model. Okay, so let's do exercise 1. So let's take a look at the exercise 1. So first, you are going to start the HTTP server, okay, and then you are going to run this code. So let's actually run the HTTP server. So I'm gonna go to H5 and HTML5 worker, okay, and then run HTTP server. So the server is running on port 8000, and then I'm going to access this HTML file, and it's basically send a message to the caller, I mean to the worker, and then worker would send back the response message saying hello Sang Shin. Okay, so let's run this one, and this is what you get. Okay. And if you take a look at the code, it's pretty straightforward. So this is the worker task1.js file. Only thing it does is basically, receiving a message. So message will be received as event, and it can access the data that was sent from the caller, and then it will just send back the hello and the message that was received from the caller. Okay. Same thing for the caller code here. So we created web worker object, passing the JavaScript file that contains this code, and it set up the on message event listener, and it basically sent hard-coded name Sang Shin. Okay. Same deal here. So this is a case that we are going to send instead of just one single string data, we can actually send an array. So in this case, let's take a look at the code first. So here we are sending a JSON object, and in this JSON object we have two key value pairs, name and age. Okay, and in the web worker case, it will just get the event, and you can access the name attribute, the name, name as well as age, like that. Okay, so that works pretty much the same. Okay, and feel free to change the code and do some experimentation. And the last exercise is, let's take a look at the code first. So this is the caller parent. So it can send it can send it does have three buttons. So 3 buttons, and if a user clicks say hi, it will invoke the say hi function, and it will just send the command is start and message is hi. And stop is actually stopping it, and it's sending the command stop and message is bye, and unknown command is foobar message and something. Okay. So what the callee does, in this case, the web worker does, it receives the message in the form of command, and depending on the message, it will just send back the message like a worker started, and stop, it will just the worker stopped. It will send the message worker stopped, and then it will close the connection. Okay, and any other message is going to just so for unknown command, it will just display the message. Very straightforward code. So let's run this one. So if I say hi, then the worker will respond back, worker started hi, and then I can send the unknown command, and then this gets displayed. Again, this is a message from the worker. And now if I click stop worker, then it's to stop. At this point, I cannot send anything, okay, because the connection was closed. Okay. All right, guys, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to do this exercise. Next topic is server-side events. What is server-side event? A client web application subscribes to a stream of update from the server whenever new event occurs. So whenever new event occurs on the server side will actually send a message to the client. Okay, so the server side event is one directional, by the way, is one directional from the server to the client. So useful use cases. Use cases include like a stock ticker information on news feed. So these are the information coming from the server on a continual basis, on an interval basis. Okay, so this is server to a client, one direction. So programming model of server-side events is very simple. So client will create event source object specifying the URL. Okay, so this is the URL location, and you get the source object. And the only thing it has to do is again using having on-message event listener, okay, on that source object. And whatever message coming from the server will be captured as this E, and then you can take a look at the ID as well as data. Okay. On the server side, you can actually use any HTTP server. So we are going to actually use in our lab Node.js. And the only thing the server has to do is the content type is set as an event stream. Okay. So this is really nothing new. This is, the server side code. I mean, the HTTP has been actually supporting this event stream for a long time. So this is not really HTML5 specific. Okay. Now, you might want to ask, what is the difference between server-side events and WebSocket? Okay, so the first difference is that server-side event is one directional, meaning it's always from the server to client, while WebSocket is bidirectional. So bidirectional meaning the client and server can actually exchange data on both directions at the same time. Okay. Now, another difference is that server-side events data is sent over traditional HTTP. So it's not using any special, channel. It's just using HTTP. While WebSocket data is sent over WebSocket channel. Okay. So server-side event server does not need to have any additional software. Okay, so whatever existing HTTP server can actually support server-side events, while WebSocket, you have to have a WebSocket implementation on the server-side application. Okay, server-side event also has some features that WebSocket does not. So automatic reconnection is possible, and it sends event ID so that client can actually check, whether in fact it has received the same message or not. If he wants to check, and ability to send arbitrary events. So, basically any JSON object could be actually sent from the server to the client. All right, so let's do exercise 2. So let's take a look at the lab documentation. Okay, so we are going to start HTTP server. So in this case, we are going to use the Node.js. So I provided SSE dash node.js file. So only thing you have to do is running node node. So this is the HTTP server. So I'm going to actually have another one. It's going to use the different port number. So should be fine. 5. Go to samples HTML5, and then so if you see you are going to see this SSE node.js file. So you are going to run this node server application. Okay. So it is up and running right now. And if you take a look at the server side code, okay, so this is URL that handles it. So if client code should specify this URL, and the only thing it has to do is basically when it's sending a response message, it has to send the content type as text and event stream. Okay, and then it's going to send. So it says the the response header type is actually set like that. Okay. And event ID is the starting time. So here event ID is going to be the time. Okay. And then for every 5 seconds, it will call this function. So we are using set interval method, and it's actually, so every 5 seconds, this function will be invoked. Okay, and so it construct the SSE. So construct SSE is basically sending an ID and data. Okay, so the server code is basically sending that message that contains the ID, which is the time, and the data every 5 seconds. Okay, now let's run the client. So we're going to actually run this client. Okay, so it's actually using 8,000. So it looks like I have to actually stop this guy. Yeah, so they actually using the same port number. So yeah, I just stopped this one. I'm surprised that this one didn't complain, however. So let me see whether this one is going to work this time. Okay, that worked. So now you can see, the server is actually, receiving, you can see the connection is created. Okay, so it's actually sending the message 5 times. So event ID is the time, and this is the event. Yeah, so both event ID and the event data is actually the time. And then after 5 times, connection is closed. Okay. All right, so that's what happened. And if you take a look at the client code, again, it's very straightforward. So you create the event source object, and then you create on event listener, and it's just receiving the data, and it's just displaying the event data as well as event ID, and both of them are actually set as the time. And when the counter is actually greater than 5, it's going to close it. Okay, and so you can also actually have on open and error. So when open is connection is closed, connection is opened. Okay, so that is probably what you actually seeing right here. Connection is opened, and data has been received 5 times, and then connection is closed. Okay, all right. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes to try this. Last topic of this session is drag and drop. So I'm sure you know what the drag and drop is all about. Before this feature, drag and drop was supported by various JavaScript library like a Dojo or jQuery, Prototype. They all support drag and drop. Okay, now you can have a drag and drop feature as part of HTML5. So no more JavaScript library is needed to make a drag and drop to work. Okay. All right, so first feature is that you can make any element draggable by having draggable equal true attribute on your element. So here, in this case, I have a div element, and I specify draggable true, then I should be able to drag this div element. Okay. Just about anything can be drag enabled, including images, links, files, or any DOM node. Okay, so only thing you have to do is just to add this draggable equal true attribute. Okay. All right. So later on, we are going to talk about this on drag start thing. So we're going to actually talk about this one later on. So in drag and drop scheme, there are a few players. Of course, there is a source element where the drag originates. Okay, so that's basically what you are actually dragging. Okay, so source element can be again image, list, link, file object, block of code, you name it. So that's basically what the draggable equal true. Okay, so that this is the source object. Okay. Source element, drag source element, and then there is a target. So target is an area to have the drop. So the target is going to catch the drop. Okay. So the target is the drop zone or set of drop zones that accepts the data that the user is trying to drop. Okay. So not all elements can be target. For example, images, that cannot be a target of the drag and drop. okay? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? You want to actually have an image to be displayed, and if you drop something, what does it mean, right? So there are some elements that cannot be the targets of drag and drop, okay? In many cases, an element can be both source and target, okay? So a div element could be actually a source, and it could be a target. And then there is actually data payload. This is what this is actually what gets dropped. So when you're actually dragging a source element, that doesn't mean the source element itself is being dropped. What is being dropped is in fact some kind of payload. Okay, so we're gonna actually see an example of that. So 3 players in drag and drop scheme: source element, where drag and drop is originating, and then target area, and then the actual data that is being dropped. Okay, so that's the data payload. Okay, draggable events. So there are a few events that are related to drag and drop process. Some of these events are related to a source element, and some of these are related to target. Okay, so here I specified, so drag start event is used with a source to initiate drag and drop operations. So when you start to drag something from a source element, this drag start event occurs. Okay, so if you see the example here, on drag start, so basically, when you are dragging this item, this event handler will be invoked. Okay, so this is event handler for this particular event on drag start event. Okay. All right, so drag start event is for the source to initiate drag and drop operation. Drag event is that when you are actually dragging things around like this, right? When you're dragging things around, this drag event will occur, okay, on the various points, okay. And we'll see an example of that in a few minutes. And drag enter, drag leave, and drag over event. This is for the target. So when you're dragging something into a target area, it will capture whether it enters the target zone or not. And if you leave, it will generate drag leave event. Drag over is actually when you have a draggable item over the drag zone. Okay, so these 3 things, these 3 events are related to a target. Okay. Drag and drop event is that when actual drop happens, this drop event occurs. Again, this is with the target. The last one is with the source. When the drag and drop finished, meaning you actually drop something to a target, sometimes you want to do something with the source, right? So drag end event is actually used with the source. So the use case of drag end event is like when drag and drop occurred, maybe you want to hide the source element, right? Because there is no more drag drag and drop to be possible, for example, or you can just change the color or something like that. Okay, so drag end event is used with the source. Okay, but that is actually when the drop actually happened. Okay, now data transfer object. So this is the actual data that is being dropped. Okay, so data transfer object is set in drag start event. So when the drag start event occurs, meaning drag and drop is starting, so this is actually event handler. So this is a drag start event handler. Inside this event handler, you can set the data transfer object. So you can actually call you get the data transfer object, and then call the set data method, and this is going to be key value pair. So here the key is the text, and we are just passing the ID, okay, of that event. Okay, so the drag start event handler is the one that sets the data transfer object, and drop event handler. So when drop actually happened, that event, then inside that event you can actually get the data. Okay, so here again event, we get the so I'm going to explain this one in a few seconds. This is not that much important for now. So what you're doing with this red line is that I'm going to get the data using the key. So that data is going to be the value that was set in this drag start event handler. Okay. Event prevent default is that you don't want to actually make something happen basically, and I'll give you an example later on. Okay. So what's important is where data transfer object is set and where data transfer object is in fact retrieved. Okay. All right, so let's do exercise 3. So in this case, let me actually show you. So what we want to do is that we want to drag this Duke, okay, from the source element to this area, okay, and we want to observe what event is in fact, what event handler is actually being invoked, okay, and so you can actually see various event handler is actually being. So when we actually drag, yeah. So why don't I actually show you the actual demo, okay, and then we're gonna see the code, okay. Click this one, and we are going to open developer console. Okay. All right. So now I am about to drag, right? So you can see drag start event handler is entered, right? And the target ID is DND source, and now we can just move this guy to drop zone. So you can see drag enter event occurs, right? And then I can just drag it out, and it's out. So it's actually causing the drag leave event to occur. I can get it back. It's entered again, okay? And if I drop it, now the drop event occurred, and the data is just being displayed, DND source. Okay, so that's basically what's happening. Let's take a look at the code. So here, drag start event handler. So basically, for any event, we just display the message on the console. And here we are just setting the data. So the key value of the data is the text. And this one is the ID. ID we are just passing. You can pass any data of your choice. And also this could be the JSON object. Here we are just sending one item, okay? But as we have seen in previous exercise, you could actually send a JSON object, okay? That contains the multiple key value pairs, okay? And then we have a drag over, drag enter, and drag leave. So basically all we do is just display the console message. And then the drop event handler, this is the one that actually called when we actually drop the that Duke into the drop zone, right? And so here we are basically getting the data, providing a text as a key value, and then we are basically then we are just adding that Duke into so we just get the ID, and so basically what we do is that we are adding this Duke image into this area, okay? So that this is the code. So basically add DND source element. This is the image element in this example as a child. So we are basically adding that image element into this area so that it can display this Duke image. That's pretty much what it does, okay? And okay, so I didn't actually when I actually drop, we also actually playing the my audio, okay? So my audio is some audio file that gets displayed, okay? So let me see. Let's actually try again. You should actually somehow I didn't hear it, so I don't know why. Okay. Okay, so now you can see that this wind. Yeah, this wind sound is actually from that audio. Okay, I think it actually lasts like 3 seconds. Okay, so that is the code, and you can see we have this is the source, right? And this is the okay, sorry, this is the source, the ND source. Okay, so we set the draggable equals true, and then we have draggable event handler. Okay, and then this is the target area. So we name it as a DND target. Then here we have a bunch of event handlers: on drop, on drag over, drag enter, and drag leave. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna give you guys about 10 minutes, and also I'm going to ask you guys to change the code so that you are actually sending a JSON object instead of just one single text. So what I'm saying is, instead of just sending just one single item with a text and ID, create some kind of the name and age as we have exercise in exercise 2 as a JSON object, and then receive that data and display it. Okay. All right. So I'll give you guys about 10 minutes to do that exercise.